All right, so we are going to start with our training. We're going to start a little early, if that's okay. And just, you are in for a special, special treat. Our first presenter is just a good soul and a wonderful investigator. And our first presenter is Cindy Koenig-Warnke. Cindy is a 24-year veteran of the Lincoln Police Department. She is currently an investigator in the Technical Investigations Unit. She investigates financial crimes, including financial exploitation of older adults and vulnerable adults. She is also a certified crime scene investigator and co-leads the Lincoln Police Department Crime Scene Investigative Unit. Cindy received a Bachelor of Science degree in sociology from the University of South Dakota, her master's degree in social gerontology, that great decision, her master's degree in social gerontology from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and a certificate in long-term care administration from Southeast Community College. Another good decision. She is a member of the Nebraska Supreme Court Commission on Guardianships and Conservatorships, and personally I've never met anyone who's a stronger advocate for older adults, and particularly those who find themselves exploited. So we will give a huge welcome to our first presenter, Cindy Koenig-Warnke. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, for everyone out there, there is not any slides for my presentation. And I do this because we're gonna do an actual case study. So I don't wanna share the information because this is an active case, and names and certain details are protected. Also, I wanna tell you, if anybody has any questions, please start sending them either by phone or by email so we can answer the questions throughout the presentation, because I want to give you the information if I have the knowledge or experience related to certain situations. And also I need to let you know that the information, I know we have people listening from all over, and this is particular law enforcement related to Nebraska. So in your areas, it may be different criminal procedures and law enforcement approach. What I'm going to speak about today is an actual case that we, at the Lincoln Police Department, have identified a need for, and working with several different partners who accommodate and serve older adults, is to protect victims from financial crimes, but specifically scams. And a lot of times we can't pursue criminal prosecution against these individuals because it's out of our jurisdiction, which my jurisdiction is Lincoln, Nebraska, and Lancaster County, Nebraska. And we refer the information on, but a lot of times it's not followed up. So we have taken an approach that at times we're going to protect these individuals from further victimization. And that's what I'm going to talk about, is an actual case where we have protective measures for a scam victim. Just to let you know, I've been in technical investigations for 16 years, and at the Lincoln Police Department, technical investigations is our financial crimes unit. So I first want to talk about, this case is specific to this Nebraska statute 28366, which is a senior adult. The Nebraska legislature enacted this statute in 2016 as they saw a need for a lot of our crimes against older adults weren't being prosecuted because many of our older adults and vulnerable adults did not have a formal diagnosis. And a lot of the prosecutors in Nebraska require a formal diagnosis. So the Nebraska state legislature created the senior adult. So that's any person 65 or older. So we don't need any type of physical or cognitive impairment. We just need an age, which is very beneficial and has helped my investigations since they enacted the statute. I'm also going to review the exploitation statute 28358. This was also revamped in 2016 by the Nebraska State Legislature because it was very narrow. The language is very narrow prior to 2016, which made it again challenging for law enforcement to pursue financial exploitation of vulnerable adults and senior adults. So I just want to review what the statute says, and this is for law enforcement purposes and also for adult protective services to pursue resources and or investigation. So it's the wrongful or unauthorized taking, withholding, appropriation, conversion, use of money, funds, securities, assets, or any other property of a vulnerable adult or senior adult by undue influence, breach of fiduciary relationship, deception, extortion, intimidation, force or threat of force, or breach of fiduciary duty by guardian, conservator, or power of attorney. My case, we're going to actually talk about the deception part. So I just wanted to review that. So for law enforcement in the state of Nebraska to pursue an investigation, we have to try to determine what statute would fit the potential criminal violation. So December 22nd, 2021, I got a call from the United States Postal Inspector regarding a Lincoln resident who may be a victim of a scam. I worked for many years with this postal inspector. He is based out of the Omaha Council Bluffs area. So because of the holidays, he was off for a couple more weeks. So he asked if I would go out and contact this victim. He said that the customer was getting calls informing her that she was in trouble with the IRS and the court, and she must pay or be arrested. Now this is very common. It's a scam, and these older adults oftentimes are victimized by these types of scams. So he wanted to have somebody go out and speak with her to see what the situation was. So that's why he called me personally. He said that the local post office where this victim usually goes, she was purchasing large amounts of money orders at the post office and sending money orders express mail to individuals that she admitted that she did not know. In the express mail packages that she was mailing, they were overnight packages, which ranged from about $32 to $40 just to mail the package. So she was spending thousands of dollars purchasing money orders and sending the packages very quickly. So per his request, I contacted the victim. A little background about the victim. She's a 95-year-old female. She lives alone in her own home. She has no children. She has a lot of wealth. She retired from the telephone company after 40 years, which she was very proud of. She invested well and saved. She said her immediate family members, her siblings that lived near her, were passed away, and she had a nephew that lived in Lincoln, but he was very busy with his own family. But he would check on her when she needed or requested that he would check on her. So pretty isolated, and research has shown that isolation can often lead to victimization. She also said that she had a neighbor that would check on her if she needed. And she said she had been primarily staying at home because of the pandemic, and she would have her groceries and any prescriptions that she needed to be delivered to her home. So she really wasn't getting out of home. Also, she only had a landline. She did not have a cell phone or a computer. And when I visited her, she did not remember how she was initially contacted by the scam. She said she received several calls a day threatening her that she would go to jail and go to federal court if she would not comply with the demands of the individuals calling. Well, I was there, I was there for probably an hour or two, and she was getting a call every couple minutes. And when the callers were calling, they were requesting her to provide a code word, which I found very interesting and I had never been familiar with when I worked with scam victims. And the code word was Ginger 101. And every time the caller called, she had to say, they would say, "What's the code word?" And she said Ginger 101. And that was the scammer's protection to know that they were actually speaking with the victim. And she did not elaborate on how they developed the code word, but she had to utilize it every phone call when she was receiving phone calls. The victim believed that she was truly in trouble and that she was going to federal jail. I had extensive conversations with her regarding if she's ever been in trouble. She had never been in trouble. She'd never been served any papers. And she was fearful because the scammers told her that her home, her car, and everything that she worked for would be taken away. And when she would go to federal jail, there would be nobody there to get her out, and she would serve a long sentence. So while I was visiting with her, she provided several post office receipts showing these express mail packages that she had provided to these individuals where she sent all over. She also had handwritten notes regarding the money she was sending to these individuals. She would have addresses, the amounts. Basically, it appeared that these handwritten notes were directions given by the callers on where to send the money, how to send the money, and what location to send the money. At that time, the estimated loss, when I spoke with her, was $29,900. She estimated when I had her first initial visit that she thought she had spent or sent over $50,000 in just a couple of months when she first started getting phone calls. And she guesstimated the phone calls started in September of 2021, and she had sent over $50,000. Through the handwritten notes, again, in what she wrote in the receipts, the loss was $29,900. So shortly after I was done speaking with the victim, I encouraged her, gave her my card, encouraged her to call me to determine if she did have a federal litigation and to talk to me before she would send any more money. She agreed to that, but she did not listen because on December 28th, a cruiser officer with the Lincoln Police Department got called back to the post office because she was trying to send another $8,000 check, which was intercepted. During the time at the post office I met with her, she said she had 2 different bank accounts which she was drawing the money on and she was sending. And at that time, after I learned where her 2 different bank accounts were, I contacted those financial institutions and spoke with them regarding her victimization and also talked to them about the 2 legislative bills that were passed in 2020 and 2021 regarding financial institutions. In 2020, LB 853 was passed, which protects financial institutions and allows them to stop transactions or refuse transactions where they believe a vulnerable adult or senior adult is being victimized and sending money to scams. And then LB 297 in 2021 was passed for financial brokers to be protected and also allow the stop of transactions where they believe financial exploitation has occurred. We do have a question.
So the question comes in and says, can property in the law include computer/mobile phone where an outsider is taking over / stalking on the system?
Okay, so I think the question is asked, can property that's being taken over potentially by the scammers, and what was the second part of the question?
This is basically can property in the law include a computer/mobile phone where I think they were trying to say where the outsider is taking over or sort of stalking on the system.
Okay, so I believe the question is regarding, so if an older adult gets a call, a lot of times you'll hear the Amazon, hey, you want Amazon, I need remote access into your computer and or phone, however you get your access, and then they take over that older adult or vulnerable adult's phone or computer and then basically steal their property, which is oftentimes assets from their bank account. Yes, that can be followed up on, but oftentimes the challenge in my position is the person that's committing the crime is not here locally in Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska, and they may be internationally or out of our jurisdiction, which I can forward the information to that jurisdiction, but it'd be up to that jurisdiction to investigate and pursue prosecution. Okay, I hope the individual who sent the question, if that doesn't answer it, send it again and we'll try to get the answer that you need for your investigation. So because of the legislature that was passed recently, I went to both financial institutions that my victim had accounts with and explained the victimization. So they flagged her account to notify of any time that she would come and try to make a withdrawal, because she was withdrawing thousands and thousands of dollars. And a 95-year-old that is on a limited income that has very little expenses, there's really no need for her to withdraw that amount of money. So during one of my visits with the victim on January 4th, she said one of the financial institutions returned 4 checks, and she thought that was great because she thought the financial institutions intercepted the checks, and the checks totaled $16,404. Actually, they returned the checks for non-payment because she did not have the money in her account, but she thought that the checks were returned just by their courtesy. There was 2 additional checks in the amount of $17,000 that was stop payment. The post office intercepted $2,000 in money orders. Another individual check was returned in the amount of $1,251, and I'll explain that a little further on why that one was returned. So on January 4th, the total amount that was returned and recovered to the victim was over $36,000 in back to the victim. So we did recover some of her money, but she continued to go to the financial institutions to withdraw money. Another financial institution contacted LPD on January 10th and was attempting to withdraw money. So she was at this institution that I had contacted. They flagged her account, and she was trying to access her safe deposit box containing her savings bond, which was $35,000. It was good that she had a relationship with the branch manager at this financial institution, because he would always make her come to the office and talk to her. And she explained that she needed this $35,000 to avoid federal prosecution. So he immediately contacted me. We spoke again, and she had a lot of support between the post office manager, the bank manager, and myself if she needed an outlet to confirm that she needed to send this money or what she needed to do with this money. And again, we continued to discuss how to protect herself from future contact of the scammers. What was challenging is during this investigation, I learned that she had not been to the doctor for several years. She had not had any formal cognitive testing. She did not have any physical testing. So really, that's why we were looking at it as a senior adult abuse, because she was over the age of 65. What was challenging, she was a 95-year-old, but I would say she maintained her home very well. She purchased her food. She maintained her checkbook. She could talk about her quilting. I would say if you had a discussion with her for an hour or two, you could see some memory lapses, but maybe some normal memory lapses. But when it came to the scam behavior, she was total not decisional. She couldn't understand that she was not going to jail. She had never committed a crime, and she was totally convinced that she was going to get her home and car taken. So on January 11th, she went to another financial institution and she requested the amount of $9,000 in a check. She had consumed a lot of my time because the banks were calling me constantly, and I wanted to protect her and I wanted to avoid the victimization and her sending any more money. But for 95, she was keeping me on my toes. She had drove to the bank, and this is the first time I saw her car, and she had a Buick. She had paint transfers where she had hit everything on all bumpers. Her driver's side door mirror was hanging on the ground. So it was obvious that she probably shouldn't be driving, but she thought she was a good driver. But she told the bank that she felt she'd done something bad and that she was in trouble and that she needed the $9,000. And when I was talking to her, because the bank had called me and we had another conversation, she said she had also sent a package containing money that was left on her doorstep on Saturday. And this was about Tuesday or Wednesday when I was having the conversation with her. She lives on a very busy street, and she left this package out on her doorstep, and she said the package contained thousands of dollars that she left on her doorstep, and the post office delivery person picked it up on Monday. After I learned this, I contacted the postal inspector, again stated my concern. He informed me that the post office had intercepted the package because there was not enough postage on the package. And at this time, since she was continuing the behavior, there needed to be some protective measures taken to protect her. I contacted her nephew. So on January 11th, the post office turned over 2 envelopes and 1 package to myself. One envelope was addressed to a mail in Tennessee. It contained an $8,000 check that was dated December 28th, 2021. And that check was a check that the financial institution had placed a stop payment on. So I was grateful for that. It was never negotiated. And also there was 1 envelope addressed to a mail in Ohio that contained 2 different checks written on the same date, and they both were in the amount of $9,000. And those were both placed a stop payment on, so never negotiated. In the package, and the package was bigger, but I cut it off so you couldn't see the return address. This was the package. It was a Priority Express package that would normally take about $10 to ship, and she put 3 basic stamps on it. So this is kind of explains her mindset that this large package is going to take more than 3 stamps. And this is the package that she said contained several $1,000s that she left on her doorstep all weekend on a busy street. So this is the package. The package contained some tissue paper with contents that were wrapped in tissue paper. And this was wrapped in the tissue paper that was intercepted by the post office. And this was left on her doorstep. And I'm really surprised, because we have a lot of package thieves in Lincoln, that it wasn't stolen from her doorstep. So there was $1,000 in the package wrapped in tissue paper with 3 stamps. So if we didn't have a proactive post office, that package could ultimately be sent to the recipient, who was a male in Kentucky. So I determined where the male in Kentucky lived, and he resided in the county, and it was Laurel County, Kentucky Sheriff's Office. So I contacted the Sheriff's Office to see how this individual is involved, and there was multiple packages that were sent to the same individual by my victim. Well, the Laurel County Sheriff's Office approaches things a little differently than the Lincoln Police Department. I requested that they go contact the mail, see what was going on. Initially, the individual that I talked to didn't really take me serious, didn't want a lot of details. I'm wondering if he went and talked to a supervisor. Then he called me back and said he needed a lot of details. So I requested that he go contact this gentleman where the package was addressed. So the gentleman that lived at that address was also an older gentleman in his 80s. He believed he won the Publishers Clearinghouse, and he thought he was going to benefit from $5,000 a week for life and a new Mercedes-Benz. And he said the money that he was receiving from different individuals throughout the United States was the money he was paying taxes on his prizes with. Initially, he said that he was putting the money he was receiving from these individuals in his own bank account. But then he was directed by Publishers Clearinghouse to open a new account where only they would have access to. And so he opened a new account per their direction, provided the account number, and he never had access to that money. He would only deposit this money, probably coming from all over the United States from these older adult individuals. I asked for a little more specific details regarding this individual and some questions that were not asked, and the Laurel County Sheriff's Office declined to follow up or go get additional information for me. So on January 18th, I met with the victim's nephew. I provided him the whole information regarding the investigation, and I encouraged him to stop the victimization, to pursue a conservatorship to protect her finances. We could not pursue a guardianship, obviously, because we don't have any formal diagnosis of her to say that she was not decisional. So I encouraged a conservatorship to protect her finances, and then if the court felt that she needed to get a neuropsychological evaluation, to pursue that avenue, but at least to stop the victimization and protect her finances. So on January 24th, and the nephew agreed to pursue the conservatorship, and he was meeting with an attorney, and he was proceeding. So I thought he would proceed pretty quickly, but about 6 days later, I got another call from another financial institution that the victim wanted to withdraw her $35,000 savings bonds again. Again, I got called to the bank, and her car wasn't out there, because again, her car is very unique. You know what her car looks like. And I said, how did you get here? And she said, Z-Trip brought me. Z-Trip is like a taxi cab service. And I said, you called Z-Trip? And she goes, no, the scammers called Z-Trip to pick her up, take her to the bank, get the $35,000, and then they directed her where to send the money, and then get a ride back home from Z-Trip. And I said, did you pay Z-Trip? She goes, why should I pay? I didn't request the ride, the scammers did. So not only did she get a ride from the taxi company, but she failed to pay the taxi company. And this was to the point that the extremes the scammers were getting to this point is, she told them that she couldn't go to the bank. She told them that she could go to the post office, so they were sending a taxi service to get her to accomplish their goal of getting the money. So a couple days later, so again, she doesn't get her $35,000 out. We feel that she's pretty protected. A couple days later, I get a call from an LPD cruiser officer that said she got contacted by the victim because she purchased gift cards. Now this is a unique situation because she has never purchased gift cards. She has always done money orders at the post office. So it's obvious she's being directed by the scammers on to change her ways of how she was accessing her assets. She continued to believe she was in trouble with the court, and she said she withdrew an additional $1,000 from her checking account on top of the about $500 she purchased in gift cards. And she said that she didn't have $1,000 in her checking account, so the bank had to transfer money from her savings account so she could get the money out of her checking account. This is the same financial institution that I had contacted, and the account was supposed to be flagged. Somehow it was an oversight by the financial institution. They gave her the money, and she was going to purchase additional gift cards with that $1,000 on top of the 2 gift cards that she had purchased. And again, she said she was directed by the scammers of where to purchase them, which was near her home at a CVS pharmacy, and she provided the account numbers of the gift cards to the scammers. So during this time, I keep in contact with the nephew. The nephew is very hard to stay in touch with because he has like a traveling job, so he drives a lot. I encouraged him. He said he had an attorney. I was also getting calls from the attorney that he had hired saying the nephew wasn't providing the information he needed, the signatures and so forth. So I would call the nephew, please, she's taking a lot of time and resources, and we don't want her to lose any more money. So the nephew said he would make it a priority. So on January 26th, when she called me and told me about that $1,000 she had taken out, I told her she was at home at that time, and I said to wait right there, that I was gonna come and take her back to the bank. So I went to her home, drove her back to the bank, and made her deposit the $1,000 that she had withdrawn. Well, one of the bank tellers was a younger lady that she had worked with at the telephone company. And so she was very familiar with that lady, and they had a good conversation. And the lady had asked her what she was there, and I said, she is here to deposit the $1,000 that she took out to buy gift cards for the scams. And my victim said, yeah, and I'm gonna take this police officer and take her behind the woodshed because I don't wanna deposit the $1,000. But I made her deposit the $1,000. She was very frustrated, again, because she was convinced she's in trouble and that everything that she saved up for and worked for was going to be taken away, her car, her home, and her assets. So finally, the nephew pursued conservatorship, and during the petition to the court for the conservatorship, they had asked for a power of attorney document, and she had said that she had a power of attorney document drawn up where the nephew was the decision maker for her, so they could add that to the petition. Well, there was no power of attorney document that could ever be located, so that was challenging to the court to designate who should be her financial decision maker, but ultimately the court agreed and allowed the nephew to have temporary conservatorship. The other challenge was, again, she had no cognitive testing, she had not been to the physician, she had not been to the dentist, the eye doctor, even though she had the ability and was able to, she chose not to go to those entities. So she had a lot of things that needed to be evaluated to determine where she was at. So the estimated loss to the victim through money orders, gift cards, checks, and cash withdrawals is $33,785.95. The amount that between the Postal Service, the Police Department, and other partners, we recovered $37,151, so she would not lose that money. The challenge was that the nephew, again, we told him that he needs to have oversight and to contact all the financial institutions that he has conservatorship to get her to stop sending the money. So regarding senior adult abuse, I just want to review this with everyone. Adult Protective Services does not investigate or help with resources regarding senior adult abuse. Due to the statutory language, when they added it in 2016, the senior adult statute, they did not add the senior adult to the reporting senior adult abuse to Adult Protective Services. So I just want everyone to be aware that Adult Protective Services will not investigate or provide services to an older adult defined by a senior adult. So Adult Protective Services means those services provided by the Department for the prevention, correction, or discontinuance of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. Such services shall be those necessary and appropriate under the circumstances to be protected, abused, neglected, or exploited vulnerable adult. Ensure that the least restrictive alternative is provided, prevent further abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and promote self-care and independent living. So a lot of individuals do not realize that Adult Protective Services do not investigate or follow up on senior adult abuse, and only law enforcement will investigate those allegations or potential crimes regarding senior adults. And so the reason that she was a senior adult, my victim, again, she had not been to the doctor, she had no formal cognitive testing, she had no physical testing, and I should also explain she could probably meet the criteria for a functional limitation of a vulnerable adult, as she was very unsteady on her feet. She could only walk a couple steps without being unsteady, and she was a high fall risk. She said she had fallen in her driveway, and her neighbor had picked her up, and she didn't know how long she had been laying in her driveway because she was trying to get to her car. So she could probably meet the criteria of a vulnerable adult with the functional limitation, but at this time, all we knew is that she met the criteria of a senior adult. So we access, as law enforcement, a lot of partners that service older adults to help us to protect older adults. And these individuals include the area agencies on aging, adult protective services, volunteer groups, law enforcement, local, state, and federal, the courts, and community groups. So through this investigation, I worked with a federal law enforcement entity. I assisted with providing information to the court. So for the conservatorship, for the petition, and I've done this a few times, it's very limited. So a lot of times, the family members that are doing the petitions do not have the exact financial information regarding the victimization for the scams. And I often get bank records, financial records, investment records, credit card records to show how much money that these older adults are sending to the scams. So through my investigation, I have pretty good figures and numbers. So I will provide information to the court, usually through a letter, telling them that the information I learned during the investigation and why I believe that this person will continue being victimized if a conservatorship is not pursued. And for any law enforcement that will be listening, if you work with an attorney and you provide that information, request that that document be confidential to the court, so it's not a public record. Because oftentimes these investigations are ongoing investigations, and oftentimes these older adults have some undiagnosed cognitive decline, and they're still victims. We don't want to put their information and the investigative information out there for the public to see. So I have requested, if I work with an attorney who's requesting the information for the conservatorship, to make it a confidential document so only the judges and the immediate attorneys who are involved in the case can see that information. So currently she has a temporary conservatorship that's protecting her, with the exception, and that took place early February of this year. But last Friday I got a phone call from the postal inspector that the post office intercepted another check for $6,000 that my victim tried to send. And it was on one of the financial institution's bank accounts, which they are aware of the conservatorship. So I'm suspecting that she had some checks at home that she weren't collected by her nephew, that she tried to mail to the scams again. And I know when I spoke with the nephew was talking about changing the victim's phone number to eliminate the phone calls. But again, you can't eliminate the phone calls because the victims usually give them their new phone number. He was gonna try to either disconnect the landline and just give her a cell phone with a new cell phone number, just to avoid the calls. But again, the challenge is he's a very busy individual, so he's probably not as involved as he should be, but he's doing the best he can. So if anybody has any questions, we have another question.
Yeah, this question comes in and says, can you just discuss a little bit how you work with banks, and is there anything you can do to help them, and maybe what's some of the process and communication you have with those financial institutions?
Yes. So the question is how do I work with banks? So a lot of the information I share with banks, first of all, I try to do presentations and educate from frontline workers to the tellers who have that initial contact, to also to branch managers, mortgage brokers, and more of the specific staff. Also, I am doing and trying to educate the financial institutions about the new legislature, LB 853, regarding that was passed in 2020, that they're protected, that they have the ability to stop the transactions or contact a third party, or at least suspend the transactions for at least 30 days if they believe the victim is a victim of financial exploitation. So it's really, I try to educate. We are fortunate in Lincoln that a lot of times if the banks believe that we have a victim of financial exploitation, they'll contact our financial crimes unit directly so we can get a positive resolution.
Very good. And then also another question, is there any training available from your office? As far as like, I think if there's any additional institutions or local businesses or whatever that want training, is there any additional training that can be offered?
From the Lincoln Police Department?
Correct.
Okay. We don't specifically have additional training, but take my information down, email me, and maybe we can connect, and I would be happy to provide some training if my schedule allows. I will try to contact you as soon as I can. I'm pretty busy, but I try to be pretty responsive. I would like to train anybody who's receptive to training, because I think that's where we start, is for protecting these vulnerable adults and senior adults, is we have to train the community groups and the partners that serve these older adults to protect them from further victimization.
Very good. And then another question, can you just briefly discuss like the example that you went through in Kentucky, and is this like a new form of scam? Have you seen anything like this before? It was kind of like a reverse sort of scam, but is it new? Has this been seen around the country in other areas?
So the question is this a new type of scam? Has it been seen in other areas of the country? It's a similar scam, sometimes with new approaches. So it could be an Amazon scam, it could be an IRS scam. Sometimes they just label it differently but use the same methods to commit the scam. What's frustrating in my job, I believe that Lincoln, here at the Lincoln Police Department, we take these very seriously and we try to follow up with them. And what's frustrating is when I contacted Kentucky, they may not have the training, education, resources to follow up as seriously as I think we do. We really try to work with our older adults and our financial institutions, either to protect them, to eliminate the scam, or protect their assets. In similar situations, I have frozen bank accounts by a search warrant. So if we couldn't find a conservator, I would take the approach of freezing the account, which I don't like to do. It's a very rare situation because it eliminates their access to their funds, but it's a protective measure until we can get a conservator. So it's a similar scam with similar methods, but it may be a different name or a different approach.
And then is there a financial crime unit all across Nebraska?
So is there a financial crime unit all across Nebraska? No, so that would be, I would consider a financial task force. I've been in talks with the FBI to create a financial task force, and the FBI could give me federal authorization, so I'd have jurisdiction across the state, and we could partner with other law enforcement officers and federal entities across the state to create this task force to address pretty serious situations. But no, there is not a task force, and it's individual law enforcement entities right now that approach each of their jurisdictions' crimes.
Okay, the next question is, was the victim's phone number changed to prevent additional calls coming in?
Yes, so the nephew was going to eliminate her landline and get her a cell phone, but the challenge is sometimes these older adults have the numbers, and even though they may not call, the scammers may not call them, the older adults, because of their poor decisional state, will call the scammers and give them their new number. So yes.
Also, are you seeing an increase in financial exploitation at this time?
Yes, so I see an increase in financial exploitation all the time. The different methods and the different ways that financial exploitation is occurring is getting more creative. These are very extensive investigations. They take a very long time, and sometimes the outcome for prosecution is not what we desire. So at that time, when we don't think we're gonna get the prosecution that we need, we take the protective measures approach. But yes, we're seeing more financial exploitation. That's because we're looking at the baby boomer era, and they have a lot of wealth.
Another question coming in said, I think they're trying to say in past tense, did anyone help the man who thinks he won the Publisher Clearinghouse?
Not that I'm aware of. I encouraged the Laurel County, Kentucky Sheriff's Office to go recontact him. Their approach was to tell him to quit answering the phone calls and quit accepting the packages. So on the one check that was returned for about $1,200 that we recovered was actually from that gentleman and his wife. My victim had wrote 2 different amounts on the check, so the bank would not negotiate the check. So that's why that check was returned. And they sent it back with a note saying, send me a new check with the amounts correct.
Another question is, this person wanted to know if you maybe can mention the Attorney General and what can his or her role be?
That would be for Ryan to talk about at the end of the day. Ryan is going to be speaking from the Attorney General's office, and he would be the best source to provide information about what the Attorney General can provide.
Okay, what can family do to prevent financial exploitation?
Families can monitor, obviously stay in good contact with their older adults. You can see the decline in your family members. Talk to them about getting phone calls, potentially scams. Also, if they allow, let them maybe approach it very sensitively, but see if you can review their bank records or their financial records to see if their spending is out of the ordinary. And then if you believe that they are poor financial decision makers and need to be protected, I would encourage family members to pursue conservatorship, get that court order to maintain and protect the finances of the family members they have concerns about.
All right, next question is, what would be first steps to take if we or your family think someone is being scammed? How can we ensure that it's a scam versus what they are really, if they really owe money?
Well, the first approach, if the question was, how do we know if a family member may be scammed versus debt they owe? So my first approach, if to solve that problem, would be to run a credit report for that family member to see the outstanding debts. And if there's no outstanding debts on the credit report, annualcreditreport.org, you should get 3 free credit reports. You can determine if it's an outstanding debt that's owed or if it's a scam. But I would start with the review of the credit report, and if you don't see any outstanding debts or not the debt that's consistent with what they're calling about, I would probably say it's a scam.
I have a question.
Yes.
So with the definition of senior adult now in the legislature, is there any additional resources or benefits that you can use if somebody does have a diagnosis or is considered incapacitated or has a determination that they don't have full cognitive ability?
So your question is regarding someone with cognitive impairment?
Yes.
Is there resources? Yes, so there, that definition, that individual would be considered a vulnerable adult by Nebraska State Statute 28386. And then that is what APS can assist with, is only vulnerable adults. So that's a substantial functional or cognitive impairment. So that would meet the criteria of vulnerable adult. So then they would have access and resources for investigation and resources by Adult Protective Services. Is that what you're asking?
Exactly, yep, thank you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Thank you for listening, and if anybody has further questions, they can always email me and I'll try to follow up. Thank you very much.
Very good. Cindy, outstanding presentation. Thank you very much. You know, I think we hear about financial exploitation and we might see a report on the news, or we might hear about a family member, but your presentation truly made real the challenges that older adults, particularly older adults that are vulnerable, may have some cognitive issues, may face. And so we are very appreciative of your wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I want to just, for those of you that might need this feature, there is a closed caption option for viewers. And so to access the closed caption option, what you'll want to do is scroll to the right of your training viewer, click on the unknown CC option, and that will give you access. Again, scroll to the right of the training viewer and click on the unknown CC option. Thank you very much. And a huge thank you to our friends from Nebraska Public Media. The accommodations are very lovely and the support, so thank you.